All right. I think everybody can hear me. Let me see if I can make sure that I'm on and that I see audio. Okay, I see 15 people in the crowd and counting. So I'm just going to get started. So today we're going to talk about Google Ventures Design Sprint, which I call a secret weapon for product decisions. Um, my name is Ron Dror. I'm the founder of a design agency called Remake Labs, and we focus solely on design sprints. So that's all we do. And I lived in the States for a while. I lived in New York for about 10 years. I worked for a few startups that you may know of. The last startup I was head of product of, SetGem, was a smart TV startup which sold to Motorola in 2012. And ever since then, I've been working with mostly startups working on their MVP. The idea being that defining the minimal viable product, the kind of the right first version of the product, is a really crucial point in the life of the product, and that's where the most learning happens. This is the company that I'm representing, my company, Remake Labs, and our message is very clear, right? Sprint for better product. And the truth is, anybody who's worked on any sort of product, and especially a software product, knows that every product has many dilemmas and trade-offs and many big questions that you have to figure out. One of them could be, how could we educate users quickly on how to use the product? Another could be, what's the pricing model for this? Like, should this be monthly? Should this be, an annual? Should this be a combination of, micro transactions? There could be many different pricing models for everything. And then the biggest dilemma of all, of course, the biggest question is, will users even want this thing that we're building? Are we building the right things for users? But humans are really notoriously bad at making good decisions. Actually, I'm going to stop here until you can get some quiet on the line. Let me see if someone can kick out the offending channel. Let me see. Because I can't really hear myself. All right, I guess I'm just going to mute things on my side and hope that you can hear it through the noise. Humans are really bad at making good decisions. This is a book called Decisive by the Heath brothers, really famous business authors who wrote Made to Stick and many other great books. And they're analyzing kind of all the reasons why humans make bad decisions. And they identify 4 villains of bad decision making. And, the first one is a very narrow framing. So we bring a decision to the table and we say yes or no, or pros and cons. So basically it's like take it or leave it. Whereas instead you could be looking at many different options and kind of comparing them in different ways. So it's very narrow framing is the number one cause for really bad decision making. Another one is confirmation bias, right? We pay attention to the data that supports what we believe, and we ignore the data that doesn't support what we believe, right? And so if you come in and you have a very strong opinion, you can find studies to justify it, even if it's just 1% of studies that do, and 99% of studies refute what you believe. So that's another villain of bad decision making. Another is short-term emotion. So, we often we gravitate toward a person or a project for various emotional reasons that only have to do with us and the way our psychology works, or us liking a certain person, rather than the real important criteria and kind of more enlightened idea of what we should be considering. And the fourth one is overconfidence. So we all tend to be, as decision makers, and entrepreneurs are no stranger to this, is too confident in our product, our ideas, our way of looking at things. We feel like we know everything, and it's especially true of the Israelis in the crowd. And that's a huge cause of mistakes and bad decision making when you're dealing with something complex and multi-layered, and where basically you don't know everything, and you should be a little bit humble. Um, and in the product room or as product designers, when we get together to make these decisions, I noticed that the quality of conversation, if you bring these kind of tendencies to bear, the quality of the conversation in the room is degraded. And so you meet humans who talk without listening. You meet humans who make statements based on partial or zero information, and they're very confident. You meet groups of people where, maybe the most dominant person and that person who speaks the loudest isn't isn't the right person, isn't the one who has the right ideas, or even the one who has the information. And you also meet people who kind of dive right into the technical details of how to do something before really figuring out what's the right thing to do. Is this the right thing to do? So the goal is not clear yet, but they're already talking about the path to how to get there. And there's a lot of misunderstandings, right? So misunderstandings in terms of we don't understand what each other is saying. We don't understand, there's some important information in the mind, locked in the mind of some other person, and we can't get to it, or we misread what they say. And then in large groups, we often just compromise. So we often give into group pressure without really expressing our ideas fully or hearing the other person fully. And a meeting of mind is not really happening, and the right solution doesn't really emerge. And the thing is, the quality of the conversation in the room dictates the quality of the solution. So bad conversation often leads to avoiding conversation and skipping conversation and not really having conversation. And when you don't have the conversations, you often don't have a solution. And so, that's really what's wrong with kind of letting our worst tendencies take hold. And this is why Jake Knapp basically decided to create the design sprint process at Google. He was a product manager at Gmail. He was also the first, not product manager, product designer at Gmail, and product designer at what today is Google Meet. Back then it was called Hangout. And he didn't quite like the way new projects were being started and the way decision making were happening. Often it was based on, personal connections, or, it wasn't necessarily based on a really good design process. And so he decided to start creating a week-long, very intense design process that helped us make the right decisions along the way. So this is a design sprint. And what is a design sprint? So a design sprint is a time-boxed 5-day process which allows 3 to 10 people on average to solve large problems and test new ideas together. So this could be a brand new product, or a brand new part of a product, or a big product problem that you need to solve in an existing product. And basically the idea is, you come in with an idea through a series of steps. You create the best prototype that a group of experts can create, and then you test it with actual users in 5 days. And so you have real data about what works and what doesn't work. And the goal is to essentially minimize the biases and the personal and the emotional side and the narrow framing, and really explore all the possibilities before you get there and learn as much as you can. So this is what a sprint looks like in the pre-corona age, when we were all in the same room, standing really close to each other, writing notes, sketching on the whiteboard. And today, when we do things remotely, we use a tool like Miro, which is kind of an infinite canvas with all these spaces for these different exercises. So after he created it in Google and ran it at about 50 different projects, or I think maybe even more than that, about 100 different projects, any product that you can imagine that Google has, they ran a design sprint. He was brought into Google Ventures, which is Google investment arms, and they continued to improve and refine the process, and ran it with about 150 different startups, including many famous ones in critical moments like Slack and Medium, Blue Bottle Coffee. These are both software and hardware, and even physical locations like One Medical, which is a medical clinic, and Blue Bottle, which is a coffee shop. So they did run it with many different companies, and the results were really good. And so in 2016, they published a book about how to run this process. And it's a very detailed, great book. And ever since then, it's sort of caught on. So all of these companies that I'm showing here, both software and banks and even Nestle and Lego, are running design sprints either routinely or whenever there's a big problem and they want to unlock some forward momentum. Lego is actually starting now and have been for a while every new product with a design sprint. Um, and even the large consultancies came in and they all started offering these design sprint services as well. So this really has this tremendous momentum all over the world. I promised this was the secret tool for better decisions. So how does the sprint improve decisions? So there's a couple of important ways. So the first one is in the sprint process, we actually listen to experts before coming to a decision. So the whole first day is about listening to many different experts and perspectives, writing everything down, putting it all up on the wall, voting on it, identifying what the most important things are before coming to a decision. And this is really important. We explore many different options. In every single exercise, there's about 20 different exercises. In every single exercise, we first diverge. We first create many options. And only then do we start selecting and filtering and focusing down on what to actually build. So that avoids the narrow framing problem. So instead of just saying yes or no to this one thing, we're looking at 20 things and then we're choosing the best one. Or maybe we're combining a couple. So that's a really important one. We also learn from others. This is an important also principle in the book. We learn from others who have struggled with similar problems. And so we look at other products very closely. Sometimes we look at dozens of products. Very often we look at dozens of products in the course of a sprint and see how they solve the problems that we're struggling with. And maybe we like it, or maybe we don't like it, or maybe we have our own take at how they did things, but we look at everything. We seek out bad news. We don't run from them. So a big part of the test on the final day is to seek out bad news. But even on the first day, we are trying to find sinkers, reasons why this wouldn't work, trying to be pessimistic and figure out what are the things that really could kill this project and try to address them, not run from them. Try to work with them, not avoid them. It's really, really important for good decision maker. And we also prototype. So everything we do at the end leads to a prototype. And a prototype is a very quick way to test something and reduce the cost of failure by actually putting it to test. And so I think this is a really important principle here as well, is fear of failure is often making us act irrationally. Whereas if we reduce the cost of failure and we're just doing a prototype in 5 days, we can try things that might work that are a little bit riskier, and that's really important. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'm going to give you a quick overview of the design sprint process and the way it works. This is not a full detailed thing. We have 2-day boot camps to learn exactly how to facilitate a design sprint, but this is a very kind of abstract basic structure. So every day has a different goal. On Monday, we're going to choose a goal for the sprint. We do this by interviewing experts, defining the goal, defining kind of the big validation questions that we need to answer, and then mapping out the challenge and creating a full kind of journey map and figuring out where the challenge really lies. This is what it looks like after a few interviews, like the walls are all covered. On Tuesday, or the second day of the sprint, we generate ideas, as many ideas as possible. And the way to do this is the whole first part of the day is looking at demos, looking at competitors who solved similar problems, looking at even companies from different industries that had a similar problem to ours, a similar design challenge to ours. Look at how they did it. And then the whole second part of the day is there's a structured way, step-by-step way to create as many sketches and ideas as possible. So that's the second day of the sprint. This what it might look like. These are pictures from the second day. The third day of the sprint, which is in an American week, it's Wednesday, is about convergence. So there are specific ways of voting that help us narrow down the many ideas that we've created in the previous day and align around a single storyboard, which is going to be the single test that we're going to do in the prototype. There's voting with stickers. It's like a heat map. We're creating a heat map with red stickers. And then we all kind of converge and at the end of the day, design a storyboard that's pretty accurate. And we already have a good sense of what's going to go there. The fourth day of the sprint, Thursday in an American week, is prototyping day. Which, by the way, I'm in a prototyping day right now at a sprint, and just taking a break to talk to you. And so we come in the morning, and morning till evening, we're making a realistic prototype, interactive, as realistic as we can make it, to get real good reactions from people, to get really authentic reactions as much as we can. So today, I don't know if you can see kind of how smooth this is, but this is a prototype created in InVision, one of the leading prototyping tools. So you can really learn a ton and get really realistic reactions because you're giving them something that's essentially indistinguishable from the app. So you learn as much as you can. And on Friday, we create at least 5 user tests, sometimes 6 or 7, where we try to learn as much as we can about how people interact with the product, what they get, what they don't get, what works, what doesn't work. And we collect it in this grid of like good and bad news that we can learn a lot from and kind of iterate on in the next, following the sprint. So this is what it might look like. We might send a prototype as a link through Zoom and have a chat with them on Zoom and see them as they click through. It's important that they guide the process. So this is the sprint structure. It's a little bit more complex than that. We actually have a full, a schedule with about 20 plus exercises. So if you wanted to get started, how would you do it? So obviously read the sprint book. It's a really great book. It has a lot of checklists and kind of sketches to show you the exercises. It's a great resource. I wrote an article, 9 reasons why we start projects with a design sprint on Medium, worth checking out. I also wrote an article that's more geared towards investors about using sprints to de-risk early stage investments. We also have a podcast. So I actually interviewed Jake Knapp, the creator of the sprint, for about 2.5 hours a few days ago. And that's going to go up on our podcast. So if you go to Remake Podcast, remakepodcast.org, you'll be able to find it. Whoops, I think I clicked out of my presentation. Essentially, you can go there. It's available on all the players. And very soon there'll be part 1 of our interview with Jake. And then we're actually scheduled to have another conversation. So kind of telling you the whole story of how the sprint came about, how it was invented, why, what happened at Google that led to this. It's super interesting. We also have a design community, which we call the Remake community. And this is the address, community@remakelabs.com, where I'm going to post some exclusive content when it's out. So when the interview is out, there'll be like the video and some other content that's exclusively on the community. And we keep adding really great design sprint materials and product design materials there. So you're all welcome to join. We also do our own facilitation boot camps. If you want to learn, it's in person. It's about 2 days. If you do it remotely, it could be maybe 3 sessions remote. You have a couple of minutes. If you have any questions, I'm going to exit out of the presentation and make sure that I'm listening. If anybody wants to write something, or let me see if there's something in the chat.